And we're gonna mix with drum racks. So I'm gonna go full screen and live and show you how I mix the levels when we're working with the drum rack to make it work. I mean, you know, you can load up a lot of samples in a drum rack, but sometimes getting it to sound right in your mix when you have all these other channels can get a little overwhelming and confusing. Sounds are nested. There's like 20 places to adjust the volume. How do you make it sound good? Well, that's what we're gonna look at today. And for anybody watching, we are doing the chat in the Mixotexture Facebook group. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can watch, but for comments and chat, I'm gonna be responding in the Facebook group as soon as my window pops up. And let me say hi when you get here. Let me know if you can see everything. I'm gonna go right into full screen right now. There's that, here's that. Okay, full screen and live. So let's make sure we can see this. I think I should have myself in the top window so it's not on top of the plugins. Just wanna make sure everything looks good, sounds good, and we'll talk about how to get your drum racks working. Click to expand. Boop. Okay, so here we have a session. I'm gonna assume everything sounds good and is working. What are we looking at? It is an Ableton project, and we've got a bunch of channels. I made this pretty simple. It's just a 10-channel mix. Let's just run through what we're hearing. So to start it off, there's a little bass sound on channel 9. It's a simple track, so this is not about a big bass line harmony thing. It's just like sound. Does that little riser thing. Got a bass sound, you know, boom thing. And strings on 8. White noise thing. That little white noise riser chatter instrument. Some hand drums. Little hi-hat loop. And I made 2 drum racks. One of them is mixed and the other one's not. So I want to show you the difference between the before and after. So here's the original drum rack. Turn up my broadcast level. Let me know if you're watching in the Facebook group, give me a yes if the levels sound okay. Just want to make sure you can hear me and hear the music. Okay, there's the original drum rack on track 4. And you can hear it, you know, there's stuff in there. Check out on track 3. Let's do that again. And I'm gonna mute some other stuff so we can really compare, okay? And now the mixed one. What I noticed different in the mixed version is, number one, the kick drum is totally more clear and tangible. It's like there's a kick drum. I can hear the ride cymbals, I can hear the clap, but the tick closed hi-hats are much more obvious, and you can feel there's even a double rhythm. Check out the other one, the pre-mixed drum rack. And this one, it's like, the kick drum's maybe heavy. Oh, Daniel's here. What's going on, man? That looks like a cool dance camp you're doing. Matt Schultz, gonna have to watch the replay sitting on the train. The pre-mixed one, the kick drum is nice and heavy, and when I solo the channel, it's like, all right, that sounds like a drum loop. I could listen to it. The closed hi-hats are a little bit buried. And we got to here. So how did we get here? What I'm gonna do is run through and show you what was in the drum rack when I started, and then what it looks like when we're done. You can see the finished one has kind of a bunch more stuff. So this is gonna be partly a mix lesson of just straight up mixing, and then partly some routing and drum rack stuff. How do you like my stand-up setup, right? I'm doing stand-up teaching, it's a lot more fun for me. So, okay, one thing that I set up all the time on my mix sessions is a spectrum analyzer on the master channel, and to get that, I just put a little key map on the bar up on the top, so I can always hit the spectrum and see what's going on in my sounds. So I'm gonna mute the bass boom, so now we're only working with the drum rack. So the first thing I do is, I want to identify what sounds are in the rack, and you know, if somebody gives me a session and I don't know what's in there, I go through and identify what are the sounds. Now, I'm gonna show you the finished one to see what this looks like. Notice the finished one says kick, clap, delete me, because there's nothing in the MIDI channel. tick two, tick one, tick two. Those are closed hi-hats, open hi-hats, ride, and psht. I'm not going to go through the process of typing in the track names and you don't have to watch me label it. The thing is that these ones, like 9 ins, close, like these samples, the track names, when I'm looking at these, it doesn't make sense. And some drum racks, as you might know, you could have 128 samples in there, you could have 60, you could have 64, whatever. You don't want to be trying to figure out what sound is what, like DTM hat, what does that mean? So I honestly label my tracks, and you'll notice that I drag them in order. So we have kick and clap first, because they're really prominent, really dominant, gonna be up in the center, you know, straight up, not panned. And then I grouped them where I have closed hi-hat 1 and 2, open hi-hat 1 and 2, ride 1 and 2, and then psht is like a little chopped cymbal kind of a sound. Compare that to the pre-version, it's like weird names, don't really know what it is, and you know, like that. Also, check out all these volume levels are at 0 on the drum rack mix channels. To get those, you just click the little triangle thing. And when you click into the little simpler, is that simpler or simpler or simpler? All these volumes, look at the, I want you to look at the volume setting in the sample. As I scroll through the samples, you can see that down in that lower right corner, each one of those, the sample volume is set at -12. Now that's a huge clue for mixing. If they set all the sample volumes at 0 for default, when you dropped your samples in and press play, it would be way too loud. Hey, Tim Laws is here, what's going on? Hey, Todd Mavis, how you doing? Thanks everybody for hanging out today. I hope this is not too basic at the beginning. I'm gonna get to the gain staging and mixing and everything. But so the first place that you can adjust volume is with these volume things. I don't do that as my first starting place. What I do is just get a listen on the basic sounds and start going through and seeing what do I need to do to this sound to make it work. So I solo a sound, hit my little spectrum key, expand this, and I can see, okay, there's my kick drum picture, what I'm really looking at. The low end of the kick drum, I put the mouse on the line, read in the little box, it says 45 hertz. So I know that my kick drum is gonna be around 45 hertz. This is the clap channel, just a straight sample, no parameters, dialed in on sampler. Let's check this out. Ooh, the part of the clap that I want is around 1 kilohertz and above, a little bit below. But down here, there's like some stuff knocking at 150, 80, a weird big bump at 15 hertz, like no good. So I know that's gonna get a high pass filter. I go through all the sounds and do a similar thing. Solo the sound, look at the spectrum analyzer, and basically ask the question, does this sound have a bunch of crap in the low end that we want to get rid of? That ride is okay, but you can see there's still like kind of a lot of low end in there. You'd be amazed at how much garbage you can have in the low end, low frequency spectrum of samples and sounds. So step 1 is basically identify the sounds, label them, drag them into a sequence, so as you're mixing your channels, you know which one you're working with and you can get your hands on them. Now let's look at my channels in the mixed version. Doop, doop, mousing around. Okay, so there is my kick drum. Nice big bump down in the bottom. There's a little notch in there that's gonna be right where the bass drone thing is, that boom sound, just for future. Now look at that. The clap sound is cleaned up. What did I do? I dropped an auto filter, dialed it up to 500. Let me get on my pushy dish here. And I like to dial those in by ear too. Notice as I take the auto filter frequency down lower, I don't hear anything, right? I don't even hear it start making a difference to like 800 or 900 hertz. So nothing under like 800 is really adding very much valuable sound. The value of high-pass filters is incredible to make space in your mix so you can hear the sounds you want loudly without having to crowd it up with a whole bunch of other stuff. And I go through with all the other sounds. Let's just look, okay. You're basically gonna see a bunch of high-pass filters. Closed hi-hat, filter up at 890. Another closed hi-hat, 2.15. Gotta use my scroll right and left buttons on my push right now to solo these. Taking me a little second. All right. Now this sound doesn't have anything going on, but I activated the filter in the sample, in the simpler, right? So there's this little parameter down here that if you want to, listen to how much garbage is in that open hi-hat. Like, it's like a flat line with all this bass going on in there that's gonna just trash up your mix. So you can, if you don't wanna drop an auto filter plugin, you can just activate the filters inside the actual sound files. And you can see I changed some of the volumes on these a little bit. Open hi-hat, high-pass filter. Ride cymbal, high-pass filter. Ride cymbal, high-pass filter. Psht, high-pass filter. And right away, that made a huge difference in cleaning up everything in the mix. So reviewing our order of operations, number one, figure out what sounds you have, label the channels, drag them in order so you can find the one you want. Then isolate or solo each sound, identify how much low frequency there is in your different drums, and get some high-pass filters in place to clean up the low frequencies out of your hi-hats, cymbals, little ticky sounds, whatever, anything that's like not a kick drum, basically, you can high-pass filter it at least up to 150 or 200 hertz, and it's gonna really help a lot. So now that I did that, we can get into some mixing and leveling, right? So, I listen to this and I'm like, all right, let's get an idea of how this is working in the mix. So now I'm gonna open up some other sounds. So here's our track, and I wanna pull in that drum rack and feel like the whole beat is working. But when I start raising the volume, like around here, those ride cymbals sound like they're in the right place. And I don't hear the kick drum yet. This is where people get into trouble with drum racks, because if I want the kick drum, I might want the kick drum up like that, and then I'm like, ugh, all the high frequency stuff is way too loud. So we gotta figure out a way to work with the kick drum in our track and not have our ears getting blasted out. And what I recommend doing in this case is mixing down. So we're gonna have the kick drum up. I'm about to show you how to measure the kick and bass, and then we're gonna mix the cymbals and stuff down to get a nice stereo mix in the drum rack that then we can fade the whole drum rack up. Rob Connolly, I am on a live video, and you are not gonna get an answer right now. I don't mind, but where's that mute conversation? I don't ever mute people. It's just that if I'm actually broadcasting, I don't want you guys to hear the ping coming through. So I'll answer your question in a little bit, dude. Some people say, oh, well, drum racks, the problem is that you can't split out the sounds to all different places, and I don't want to have my mix in one stereo field. I'm going to show you how to make a stereo mix inside drum rack with all the sounds in the drum rack. There's nothing wrong with making a great stereo mix of a drum rack with your kick drum included. If you know how to mix and you get your kick drum in the right spot, you can do that, and you can actually do all the processing in drum rack with kick drum plugins or whatever to make it work. But if you absolutely, completely have to have things going to different places, what you do is you can select your kick drum channel, right-click on it, and do extract chains, and that's gonna pull it out and make a different instrument on a completely different track with only that sound in there with a copy of the MIDI clip, so you can play that sound, process it differently, route it somewhere else, drag it to the other side of your project, whatever you wanna do, you can do that. So, for example, if you're building a drum rack where you go and like grab your samples and you're like, okay, I'm in my sample library and I wanna get some kick drums, so I search for kicks and I open up and I'm like, all right, deep house, free sample, blah, blah, blah. Whatever, you can, sometimes what I do is I take the drum rack as a container and I drag all the samples in. I wanna have these hi-hats, but I don't know which one, so I'll get like 10 hi-hats in there, a bunch of kick drums, and I have one drum rack that's like a big bucket of sounds. And then I audition them while I'm programming the beats, and once I figure out which sounds really work together, or maybe I have a couple of them layered, then I might extract the chains and create multiple instruments. But I'm not gonna do that right now because we don't really need to, and I wanna show you just how to make a stereo drum mix. And remember, like back in the day when you were working with a sampler, your sampler probably had a stereo output, and you had to make a mix in the sampler that would come out the stereo left, right, and sound good in the beat. So in your life, you're gonna have to make stereo mixes that sound good. Guess what? When you get to the master channel, you have to commit to making a stereo mix that sounds good. Don't push it for your mastering. Don't tell Pipclit to fix it for you. You gotta learn how to make a stereo mix. So don't try to export all your chains separately because it just gives you more stuff to play with. So where are we? We have all our sounds with the low end kind of cleaned up, and our sample volumes are basically at -12. I'm looking in the lower right corner of the little simpler instance. And I'm going to leave those volumes at -12. I'm not going to try and mix the volume levels like this because I want to keep that -12 available in case I need music later, or volume later. What we're going to do first, remember I said we wanted to turn up the drum rack and get a nice kick drum feel coming out, right? So the first thing is, let's just measure. That low bass boom is coming through. Now I have to watch my broadcast levels. And if I look on the master channel is at 0, thank you. Okay, that bass sound is peaking around -16. We got plenty of space to add stuff on top of that. So what I'm going to do is, I want to allow space to adjust later. So let's take the kick drum volume. Notice on this little green meter on the device window, you can see that there's a nice healthy level of signal coming through the channel. You're reading the gain, like the peak level of what's coming through the channel. So let's pull down this fader maybe around say -12 on there. And now we're going to fade up track 4 until it starts sounding good. And the reason I'm doing it like this is I want to make sure that I have space to add more kick drum if I need to. Meaning when the drum rack is up on track 4, and I want to add, if I get the cymbals and claps and hi-hats and everything in place, and then I want a little more kick drum, because you're going to want a little more kick drum. This -12 setting on the kick drum channel is going to give me space to add more kick. Whoa, stay open. So right now what I'm doing is I'm just going to the stereo volume of the drum rack itself, and I'm balancing the level of the kick drum and the level of the bass sound, just pretending that drum rack is only one kick drum sound. And I could put this all the way up to 0 dB on track 4. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep it down a little bit, so in case I want to raise the level of the whole drum rack, I have space to do that. I like to leave myself a little bit of space for later. It's like when you go on vacation, you pack a suitcase, but you leave some space because you're going to buy stuff when you get there, like a hoodie or whatever. Okay, so now let's check the master level spectrum. There's my bass sound. Remember I said something about 62 hertz? And my kick drum is around there with a nice bump in the 50s, 40s or something. So what I'm going for right now is the feeling of bass, and on the spectrum I want to just identify that I can see the two sounds as separate independent sounds. Generally a combination of hearing it, seeing it on the meters, reading the master peak level. You put all that together and you get the levels at the right place. And I'm in headphones right now. Normally I would blast it in the speakers, walk back over there, walk around the room, imagine that I'm listening to a record and feel if it sounds right. But basically it does right now. So the next thing I'm going to do is bring in all the other sounds, but I'm not just going to unmute these things, because I raised up a lot of levels and I don't quite know what's going to come out when I unmute all the sounds in this mix. So this is kind of a workflow thing, especially if you're in a studio with clients. You don't want to unmute stuff and blast your people, or if you have people in headphones or whatever, you don't want to do that. Why is my push blinking? That's weird. So get over to the clap, and now I'm mixing the drum rack that's not mixed. That's why they're not labeled. Okay, do this like this. So now it gets to be the fun kind of thing, where you can just really mix by feel and start fading in sounds. And it's really intuitive and fun. This is the best part about mixing, where you just get to play with volumes and get in the groove. And I'm even getting ideas for how I want to do the song structure of like 8 bars of this kind of thing, and then coming in. Ben Edwards, how you doing? Also getting a 1-hour mute. There we go. If anybody has any questions so far, type them in, let me know how you're doing. 12:20, we're doing good. I want to keep this down to 45 minutes or something like that. And what I was saying about song structure is a lot of times muting sounds, fading them in and out, gives you good ideas for how you want to like structure your song. Oh, that's that little crash thing. See, this is why I label my sounds and organize them in the other version, so that I can see which ones are in view. All right. My push is like going totally dead and then coming back to life. Not sure why. Now let's fade up some rides. And okay. Now that's kind of a cool mix. You can hear the kick drum, you can hear the individual hi-hats, you can feel that all those sounds are there. It's not like you're totally missing some sounds you don't even know they're there. And we're riding the levels that are at a good position in the master channel. We got tons of space to raise the level, make it sound good. And let's put that up just a little bit. So I'm gonna mute this one and show you a little bit more on the completed drum rack, because I spent some time EQing the different sounds. For example, on the kick drum, I cut this is kind of important. I cut the duration of this kick shorter, because that heavy low end bottom thing was kind of interfering with that bass sound from track 1, that boom, right? That boom has a long tail. I want that bass to be going on for a long time, so I don't want my kick drum also going woof, woof. I want the kick drum compact, like a short duration, like a stubby kick, you know? So I just chopped the sample shorter and, you know, turn it up a little bit more. Here's my EQ on the kick drum, and on band 2, I put a nice little notch to make space for that exact bass sound, which is just droning along. Right in that 65 hertz frequency. And then a little auto filter high pass on there. And then basically it was just high pass filters. So the thing I wanted to show you about this was, since I had these sounds grouped with the ticks and the hi-hats and stuff, I want to show you the value of panning. It's such a cool thing that happens. Okay, here we are, kick and clap. There's our beat. Man, just one closed hi-hat can be enough. Now I'm centering my pans. Okay, now they're both centered. See, I'm doing pan position. Maybe I'll expand these tracks a little bit so you can see the actual pan knobs. The cool thing about panning is that when you spread sounds apart, it just gets so much more spacious. So let's go just that closed hi-hat. Bring that over to the left side. I don't want it to be all the way left, but it doesn't have to be in the center. So let's just bring that in a little bit on the left. And same thing for that little other rhythmic closed hi-hat. Doesn't have to be all the way hard right, that's too far. But we just spread it out a little bit. You don't consciously hear it like a stereo mix of the hi-hats, but it's working as a stereo mix. Now let's go to the next pair. And let's get a little pan vision. Okay, that one came in left. 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we got one on the other side. And again, you don't have to hard pan these hard left and hard right. That's gonna be a little bit too much. You don't have to keep them straight up in the center, because that's kind of like, doesn't give your mix any dimension. So I'm gonna move them out to the side a little bit wider than the closed hi-hats. And interestingly enough, when you pan things to the sides, you don't need quite as much of it, which is great. When you move it, there's competition in the center. So when you move things to the sides, you can bring the levels down a little bit and your mix gets more clear and you hear them better. paradoxically, even though they're quieter, at a quieter level, you hear it better. And let's go on to the rides. Let me open these up so you can see. Now there's our ride cymbals straight up in the center. Hey Tim, yeah, that's a good question. You're asking, is there a way to route the sounds separately? Say I want to send the kick to a low group and the snare and percussion to the drum group. Can this be done using the same drum rack? Yes, but you have to build the drum rack first. And then what you do is you click on the element you want to move, like the kick drum right here. Let me save first. Right click, do extract chains, and watch what happens. Doink. Live just built a new drum rack with a MIDI clip and all this stuff, and now it's over here. That yellow one called kick, that's behind my broadcast display window, sorry. Live built a new drum rack with one sound and the MIDI clip with that one note. So you get the whole thing there on a different channel with the different audio output option. Not now. Oh my gosh, I'm getting all these upgrade messages and weird stuff. So then you can take your kick drum, which is still a MIDI clip with a simpler, and it's a drum rack, and you can send it to go to any of your outputs. That's no longer an element of the drum rack that it came from. So I'm going to undo this because I want to show you how to mix inside of a stereo drum rack. But yeah, you can basically, collect all your samples in one big drum rack container, pick out your sounds, program your beat, get the MIDI and the patterns and everything cool. And then when you're ready to mix, you can extract every chain out to a separate drum rack with a separate audio output and route them wherever you want, which makes it pretty easy to get things going on. Where you see on the bottom, it says audio 2, and there's some options down there. I want to get to that in a second. That's not the same thing. That's an internal routing for an effects bus in the drum rack. So I hope that answers your question. That's a good question. And what was I doing? Whoa, pan position with the ride cymbals. I love it. So we got the 707 ride, 909 ride. And I'm going to pan these pretty far to the sides so that in the mix, basically, we've got the feeling of the closed hi-hats up in the center, open hi-hats a little bit wider, and the rides are like farther to the sides. Tim, looks like you got it. Awesome. And that gives us a nice, spacious stereo drum mix. And again, when you put things way out to the sides, you don't need as much of it in the volume. This is a great, great tip for vocals or anything where you have multiple copies of a sound or layers. Pan them to the sides and lower the volume of the layers a little bit, and you'll find that if you have like 3 vocals, as soon as you pan the 2 to the sides, they don't have to be as loud. You'll hear them at a quieter level. Like at a lower fader level, you'll still be able to hear them because they're out to the sides. Okay, so I've got my drum mix basically set up. Let's check with our other layers. I think these drums could come up a little bit. There's our original drum rack that was half mixed. And here we are with this drum rack. Notice that it sounded pretty good. We still got tons of headroom on the master channel. And if I want more of this whole drum rack, I can bring it up like that. Or, like I was saying, if you just want a little more kick drum, I still have -6 dB that I can bring up out of there. And without going too deep into drum mixing as the art and science of drum mixing, let me minimize the drum rack just to make it very clear. And that's an important thing I just did. It's really easy to make a mistake. What I want to do is drop a glue compressor on the drum rack as one whole thing, which means I want the glue compressor on the whole drum rack. Stereo drum rack output, compressor on the output, compress the whole thing. It's easy to make a mistake when the drum rack is open like this and you're in a channel. It's easy to be looking at like one of the drum pads or one of the sounds and then drop your glue compressor at the end of this chain and think it's on the whole drum rack, but it's only on one processing chain. So to avoid that mistake, make sure you select the drum rack channel first, minimize all the way down, and then you can clearly put the plugin after that and get it operating on the whole drum rack. For drum compression, I like to do a slow attack time to make sure I don't crush my transients. Put it on auto release. 2-to-1 ratio is good, and that drum rack has a pretty cranked up level actually. It's getting compression even with the threshold all the way up, which means my combination of sounds is a little bit too high. Maybe I didn't spend enough time reading my meters. So all the way at the edge of the drum rack right here, that little level meter shows that it's almost peaking, like internally peaking. So if you're in that situation, to have proper good gain staging where I'm not cranking the levels, I'm gonna select everything here and drag it down like a few dB. Now when I look at the drum rack channel, the green's bouncing, it's up to the top of the channel, so it's, there's a nice healthy level of signal coming through that channel. And when I want to compress it, okay, now I can hear that, yes, definitely that compressor is working on the whole drum kit. So let's just get it going so there's a little bit of compression happening. Okay, so that is basically how to make a drum mix where you end up with a stereo channel with all your sounds coming through it for your beats, and we measured the levels of everything else in the track, so we know that the bass line and the drums are going to be working together. We got plenty of kick drum. We even have more space to add more kick drum. If the kick happens to not be loud enough in this situation, check out all the places we have to raise the level. First, we can go to the kick drum sample itself. I got 12 dB of space over here to raise that sample volume if I really had to. That would be my last resort, actually. I could get some gain from EQ8 Master, auto filter. I could set it up on a vintage circuit model and raise gain on that. I could raise the kick drum volume in this channel, and I have 14 dB of space in the whole drum rack mix. So if I wanted to, I could raise the volume of the drum rack mix on track 3 and then drop down the rides and the hi-hats and everything to get that kick drum absolutely pounding through the track, and we still have space on the master channel. That's what makes it tons of fun. Give me a yes if you're with me so far. I want to know if this is helpful or not. It's kind of like just traditional gain staging and mixing, but within a drum rack. And the main idea is that you absolutely can make a great mix only using a drum rack. You don't have to split out all your sounds to like 20 different processing chains. You can do it in one place because Live allows you to drop plugins on each individual sample, make a little processing chain in there, which is like having a multi-track mix or a group track with channels in the group. So now let's look at a couple things in drum rack that we'll put the finishing touches on this mix. Okay, so here we are in the drum rack. And what does that mean, finishing touches? Well, drums often sound good with reverb and delay, and I put a parallel compressor on here. How did I get this stuff in there? Can I just hit the delete key? This was super confusing for me when drum racks first came out, I think in Live 6. I downloaded one and it had reverb on it. And I was there for an hour, like I would listen to it and press stop, and I'm like, I hear a reverb. I completely hear a reverb, and I didn't know where it was. Well, the answer is it's down at the bottom in this little tray down here. If you look all the way on the left edge, there's a send and return section, and you click the R for returns. It opens up this little thing that says drop audio effects here. And that can be confusing because you don't know where the send levels are. Well, you don't get the send level until you actually drop something in there. So let's go to our audio effects, reverbs and resonator, and let's drop a hybrid reverb right in that little slot. Joink. Now it says hybrid reverb. If I close that return, it's gone. Okay. And then the send view, it says send-A. Just to make sure it's clear that there is what that little A is, let's grab an echo plug, drop it right down there again. We created basically another effects chain, and now we've got send A and send B. So like with the clap, I have one controller to put the clap into the reverb, one to go into the delay. This is just like making return tracks in your session up here. So if I open the return section up here, what do I got? The Matmosphere effects unit, an echo, and a reverb. And then if I want to see the send view, I open up the sends. These controls are over by the master channel to get a look at where your effects are. And with a drum rack, it lets you do that same thing right inside drum rack, which is super cool. That is what absolutely allows you to do whatever you want with it. You can put on your effects, parallel compression, all that kind of stuff. Let's dial up some effects here. I didn't do this yet as a finished mix. So what sounds are going to get reverb? How about some claps, right? And I want to figure out which reverb I'm using. So let's go to Made for Drums. Put this on 100% wet because that's a return effect. Something like that. Now as I turn this up, we get more. I'm going to raise my broadcast level a little bit. Make sure I can hear that reverb. Okay, let's get some reverb coming in. Oh my gosh, wrong. Okay, make sure I got the right field. Not too much. How about some closed hi-hats in there? And since we had some stereo pan in our hi-hats, we're going to get a little stereo feel in the reverb. Something like that. And then maybe, what's our echo doing? Eighth note with a little bit of a lag on there. Get that all the way wet. A little less feedback. I like to filter my delays. And that little crash kind of cymbal sound, I think that would be good on delay. Don't let me space out and mix too much here. And I'm going to raise up the feedback a little bit longer. Take the clap down in the delay. So it's subtle, you know, it's not like a okay, like that. And a fun thing about compression on a drum mix is that you can have like a really nice subtle level of delay and reverb. And when you get into compressing your drum mix and raising the level of it, you get a little bit more of the effects. Now, I hope that makes sense. Let me know if you're with me on the effects sends and how to work with them inside Drum Rack. I know it's not the same as having like knobs to control on your send view, but what we did was I opened up the return section first. I dragged a reverb and a delay in there. And then by looking at the send view in Drum Rack, we can see that each sound, like kick, clap, hi-hat, whatever, has an A level that goes to the reverb and a B level in that field that goes to the echo return. This is, again, why it's really helpful to name your samples, because when I want to put reverb on the clap, I know that it's the clap on this slot, and it's not some sample like, you know, X95977 or whatever. That's like, what the hell is that sound? It can be annoying to label your channels and take care of all the organization first, but it saves you so much time. It makes it more fun to mix, so you can just like grab the sound you want, put the effect on it, get it working, and it works right away. So there we go. Now let's bring our mix back together. Okay, there's a little loop. Cool, Tim. Thanks for the thumbs up. Yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. This is going to be, I'm about going to wrap it up in a little bit. Now I just want to get the whole mix back together with all the sounds in there, double check to make sure that it's working, it sounds right, we have enough kick drum, the whole thing is balanced, and nothing that I did in drum rack has messed up the other sounds. Because when you're in soloing a drum rack with only that stereo mix, you can go really deep into it and be like, I hear every single detail. But then when you drop the rest of the sounds back in the mix, you might not hear all those little details. So let's just mix a little bit and make sure everything's working and we have our levels together. I think I'll pull the mix down completely and mix it back up. Mix it up a little bit. To, what the hell's going on with my push? To show you just, again, how I measure stuff and make sure the levels are working right. So let's start with the kick drum here. Let's see what we got. So kick drum by itself, master channel peaking around -15. That's perfect, which means basically I can turn up this level in the room, turn up my monitor volume, whatever, until it feels nice and thumpy, and I think it's going to be cool. All right? There's a drum rack with everything in. Let's bring in the bass. And that's like ridiculous bass. Remember we put that little notch EQ in the kick drum? That's right there on the spectrum, around 65 hertz. I think it's a note C. Maybe it's a B. And that bass note is popping up right there in that notch where the kick drum was. And that might need to come down. I'm mixing in headphones right now, so I'm not going to say the sub bass is perfect, but let me know how that sounds on your end. Somewhere around there. Let's just compare our original drum rack. Wow. I got to really push that kick drum up. Todd Mavis, thank you, giving me a good mix. I like it. Now we're going to bring in our other percussion layers. I purposely made a project that had drums on other channels so that the drum rack we're doing can fit in with the other drums, because I know you guys work in tons of layers and you have tons of channels. So now what we're going for is making sure that our stereo drum rack mix sounds good with everything else. And you know what? I'm kind of having some feelings right now about these hi-hats, because once that conga loop came in, I wanted a little bit more of these closed hi-hats. And once I hear it in the mix, there's too much reverb on that closed hi-hat. Closed hi-hat needs to be nice and tight and not have some psycho reverb on it. So that is tick 1, send A, coming down. Drum reverb should be something that you don't notice it as a big obvious thing, but if you mute the reverb, you can feel that it's gone. So now I'm kind of doing what you call touch-up mixing. This is like a lot of fun to just feel what's happening, introduce the other parts of the track, make sure that everything fits. And that's a real scratchy sound. Make sure we can hear that. Strings could maybe come down a little bit. I like when the strings are just in the background a little bit. And you're probably curious about this analog bass sound. It's just like a analog instrument. I'm not sure I'm doing a lot with that channel strip. Hard side chaining and a little bit of pitch bend. And I just wanted to have a sound that fills in some space in the mix in that mid area. Maybe the congas could come down a little bit. And since we have 13 dB of headroom in the main mix, let me watch my broadcast level. I want a little more of our drum rack. I'm not gonna lie. And at this point, it's so much fun. When you have headroom on the individual channel and headroom on the master, you can just crank your drum levels, your kick drum or whatever, and really get it coming through the way you always wanted. And I'm happy with that. Let me go to my master channel spectrum again. Check out how the line is bouncing. And check it out, it's 12:45. Okay, let me know if this was helpful and if you learned anything. The big takeaways that I wanted to give you are, you need to be measuring your levels inside a drum rack just like every place else in your mix. You are mixing, you need to perform the act of measuring and adjusting your channels, AKA gain staging. So you gotta do that inside drum rack. There's a couple more places to do it with the actual instances of Simpler and then the channels and then the rack itself. So take care of those things. Label your channels so you know which one is which so you don't mess up with which one you're adjusting. We dropped a couple of plugins on each slice or piece of the beat or sample. So, we looked at what sounds needed, dropped, a little EQ, a little auto filter on there. It's really important to look at your sound on a spectrum analyzer, identify which ones of your drums have extra low frequencies that you don't need, because most drums are not bass sounds. Oh, Tim said, very helpful. Thank you. Learned some cool stuff. Hey, great. I'm glad to hear that. High pass filters are the #1 mix tool I use from plugins. If I had to make a mix with volume, pan, and one other thing, it would be a high pass filter. That's like even before an equalizer, I would pick a high pass filter. Or if you give me a 3-band EQ, I'm gonna cut the low end on like almost every sound. That's how important it is to just clear out that stuff. I always say it's like, if you're making a salad, right? With cucumbers, high pass filters is like peeling the cucumber or peeling the carrots, or even more like peeling a banana, actually. Imagine you're making a fruit salad with bananas and you slice the banana into round chunks and you leave the peel on. People are gonna eat it. They're like, what the hell, Or like pineapple, you have to cut off the outside. So high pass filters are like that. We labeled the channels, put in some high pass filters, measured our sounds to make sure we knew what frequency content was in there. Then it got to the fun part of just mixing volumes to make it sound good, like good by your ears. I parked the kick drum at a volume with the output fader so that the master channel was peaking around -12 dB. That gave me plenty of space to pull up all the other channels just naturally. I want the hi-hats, I want the rides, whatever. That's when you literally mix by feel. That's the moment when people say, just use your ears, bro. That's the moment you just use your ears. And it is intuitive, and that is the right answer at that moment. But before you get to the part of just use your ears, you got to clean up the bass out of your extra sounds, make sure you know what sound is where, and make sure you measured the level of your instrument or whatever device you're working with so that you have space on the master. And then you can use your ears, push up levels, push faders, play with it by like a little kid, just like do, and have some fun with it. And we made a rough mix in mono. Next, I had my sounds grouped, like my 2 closed hi-hats, 2 open hi-hats, 2 ride cymbals next to each other, not an accident, so that I could easily take them, listen to them, spread them out a little bit, and create the width that I want in the mix. Robert Folkson. Oh, cool. I haven't used the drum rack like that. Now I'll give it a try. That's what it's all about. If I can give you some ideas on how to do something new that you haven't played with before, that's going to send you into Ableton, which is where we want you to spend time, not on Netflix. So we did pan position. We did a rough mix. We got the drum rack sounding good by itself. And all those things we were doing so far were like this in solo. And when you're mixing in solo, that's cool. But remember, you got to have some other sounds coming in. So we brought the drum rack back into the mix with everything else and made some adjustments and thought, okay, I want to hear the hi-hats. I want to hear the rides. I want to make sure I can feel everything and have that kick drum thumping. And we had room to bring up the kick drum. And then we got into the secret, tricky drum rack routing where we opened up the return section and used some effects built inside the drum rack as one big package, which is really cool because when you mute it, the returns and effects and everything get muted all as one package. It's like all inside there, which makes it really easy to work with. And we looked at how to find the levels. So when I want to put the clap into the reverb is on drum rack return A, little A. I pick the clap sound, follow it over, just kind of like a spreadsheet, right? You've got columns and rows. Follow the clap over, find the send A level. and you can bring in the sound you want. Remember, if you want to add anything after the drum rack, it really helps to double click, minimize the whole rack to make sure that you're dropping your compressor or whatever all the way after the output of the drum rack and not accidentally dropping it somewhere in the middle, nested in some channel where you're going to be tweaking the knobs and you're not hearing it work because it's in the wrong place. I just made a modern minimal check track. Woo! Thanks, man. And then I put a glue compressor on there. And remember, all these little green meters in between all your plugins are showing you the level of sound going through that channel. It's a really good idea to keep an eye on these. Keep them at the top of the green. They can go in the red a little bit because on these internal buses, you're not going to hear distortion. Just keep an eye on where those levels are. The place you want to avoid going into the red is on the master, because then that's going to take an overloaded signal and send it to your audio interface where it becomes bad sound, and then you die. All right, that's about it for me. It's 12:51. Last note, since we're screen sharing, let me just show you where you can find some help with your Ableton universe. We'll pull that down a little bit. This is the Mixitecture member site, courses.mixitecture.com. When you first come in there, you might see it with this opening window that says, "Welcome to Mixitecture," and that is a picture of a hands-on session lesson in the top thing, which means a guided Ableton project where you get audio instructions and examples and activities all inside Live. So when you want to learn about sound design or mixing or something, you don't have to watch a video. You download a session lesson project, open it up inside Ableton, press play, and you hear instructions that tell you to do stuff, and the knobs are right there, and then you do it. And you learn by doing it. Learn by doing it is the best. I'm not making fun of it. This is really cool. I invented this whole format, and it's super cool. And I want to draw your attention to this course called Gain Staging Strategy for Bass Mixes, which is exactly what we just did. Mixing, gain staging. We did it inside a drum rack, but the principles are the same. These are the same principles people have been using to record a microphone since the 1930s. It's what audio engineering is. Measuring, adjusting levels, keeping track of where things are. And I built a whole course on this where you learn by doing it inside Live with a project, 16 channels, all the sounds made for electronic music, kick drum, bass line, synths, beats, whatever. And we go through the process of gain staging in all these different guided projects. For example, setting the level of individual tracks, mixing with track groups, mixing with buses and effects, like we were talking about sending your kick drum out to a different group or something like that. And then finally, there's a section at the end with some printable guides and things that help you lock in what you're learning with, like the 10-step mix down guide, 8 great mix tools that talk about what devices I'm using. And it's really easy to remember because it's all in one place, and you learn it by doing it. So this is a super fun course. And if anybody out there watching wants some help with your gain staging, you click the green button and it takes you to this sales page that will just remind you of everything that's included, how it works, what you get, which platform you need, what version you need, all the FAQs are in there, and you can sign up for it, which I recommend you do because it's going to make your mixing sound awesome forever. Where is my broadcast window? I want to go back to Cameraland. Cameraland, here we go. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Steve Knotts. This is a Wednesday workshop. And I'm doing these with questions we collect from the Mixitecture Facebook group. So if you're watching on YouTube, come to the Mixitecture Facebook group. We do track feedback every week. You can ask for help with your mixes and help other people and get some really cool tips on sound design, song structure, and mixing to make your tracks better. So you have more fun producing and you don't have to bang your head against the desk crying hot and salty tears all night long. That's it. Everybody else, thanks for watching, and thanks for the feedback on the paid subscription idea. We're getting some really cool ideas of how it's gonna come together to get the tightest group of our production crew working together every week, sharing tracks, helping each other, finding labels, getting them out there, getting it done, getting it mastered. It's exciting. Todd, have a good rest of the week to you too. And it's been about an hour. I guess this is a good time to wrap up the workshop. So we'll see you next Wednesday. And the next event coming up is Saturday, live track feedback in the Facebook group. So thanks for watching, everybody. I hope this helped you with your drum racks. And when you make a mix, send it to me and let me know so